Hi, I'm Kevin Don, the Get Fit Guy. I'm here to share my accumulated decade of knowledge in the strength and conditioning industry to help you to separate the facts from the fallacies. Now, legs. They're pretty important, aren't they? Certainly when we consider that humans are upright bipeds. The legs help to support and locomote. So they propel us forwards, backwards, push us sideways, and allow us to stand in a queue. They also handily bend right in the middle, allowing us to sit down to rest and perform critical bodily functions such as evacuation. Now, as we age, like every part of us, our legs are subject to entropic processes. They undergo losses of muscle mass and bone mineral density. In my own family, my father has gotten to the age that if he starts to lose his footing, he can't recover the situation, or if he slips and falls down, he can't get up again without assistance, which is crazy considering he was a powerlifting champion. But he's also of that generation where the mindset is that the elderly shouldn't be lifting weights, and of course, the same generation where he won't listen to his child telling him what's best. Now, whether you want to be able to just have more sure footing on uneven terrain, play games with your children or grandchildren, or hit the golf course with your friends, or, even just have legs that would make a rhinoceros jealous, let's have a look at the best way to strength train your legs and make that happen. So, previously on the podcast, I've spoken about a strength hierarchy, which, in case you don't remember, it's like a pyramid, and the broadest part at the base is motor control, and above that we've got muscular endurance, strength endurance, and finally maximal contractions. What this just means is, first of all, you've got to be able to make the pattern required. Above that, you've got to be able to make the pattern required as you're becoming more tired. Then make the pattern required as you're becoming more tired and controlling an external object. And finally, then you'll be ready in terms of muscular gains and central nervous system conditioning to do a maximal contraction, or just lift as heavy as you can. So if you want to get strong legs, the first thing is you have to create an approach that will allow you to make the shape required. And this will apply to everything, whether it's your squat, your bending pattern, or your upper pushing or pulling. Now, here we want to be able to focus on the ability to perform knee bends in a squat pattern and a lunge pattern. These are both really crucial everyday movements because walking and running are lunge patterns, sitting down and standing up is a squat pattern. So, first of all, what's the shape required? So if we take the squat, you want to be able to bend at your hips and knees simultaneously. Now, it's really common because of sedentary lives and people kind of sitting in offices all day that many of us are lacking the ability to make this pattern because of things like tight hip flexors and weak posterior chains. The most common thing I see people doing in a squat is bending their knees first. This means that as you approach the bottom of the squat, it's kind of nowhere to go and your heels lift off the ground, which, of course, if you don't have your whole foot on the floor, it's pretty unstable. Secondly, when you perform a squat or also a lunge, your knee should stay tracking over the middle of your foot with your shin as vertical as possible. Now, if your knee begins to drift inwards towards the middle of your body, we call that knee valgus, and that's been positively correlated with knee injuries, and much more so in females because the shape of the pelvis is a bit different, and therefore the angle of the femur or the thigh bone from the hip to the knee hangs down at a larger angle than in a male. We call that the angle of Q, which stands for the angle of quadriceps. Similarly, it's important we have a strong core and be able to hold our torso in a fixed position as we move, because once you add load, you'll find that a deformable lever, your torso being the lever here, is a poor transmitter of force. We always want to squat as deep as we can, maintaining the above points of performance. It's really important that we get rid of this idea that deep squats are bad for your knees. They're not. They're kind of bad for your knees if they don't track centrally and are wavering all over the place. But also remember that strength is gained in the range it's trained. If you do shallow squats, you won't ever be strong in a deep squat position. You might remember the SAID principles we've covered in the past, which define specificity. So we should also always be aiming to squat in free space with a load that we have to control independently. So that would be a barbell, a dumbbell, a kettlebell, maybe a sandbag or another object. And this is because it mimics reality much better than machines, such as a Smith machine, a leg extension, a leg press, which keep us in a fixed range of motion. When we squat in free space, we have to use other muscles to control things like balance and stabilization, which we don't have to do on a machine. So I'd recommend bearing in mind that machines, they weren't invented to keep you safe in the gym. They were created to make gyms more profitable. The first machines had the purpose of allowing gyms to operate with little to no staff, because now for the first time, nobody needed to be taught how to use a barbell. This happened in the 70s with a big marketing push by a company called Nautilus, who still make machines nowadays, although several small independents had made machines earlier than this. You've got to remember that free weights are king for all outcomes if you're injury-free and able to do so. So now that we've covered a few technical points, let's just talk about building capacity, because it's a fact that the biggest predictor that we have for potential of force output is the cross-sectional diameter of a muscle. In most cases, a bigger muscle has the potential to create more force than a smaller muscle. So at some point, you're going to want to increase your muscular size because this will lead to better strength outcomes. It's generally accepted that more time under tension will grow your muscles better than a small number of fast reps. So we should focus on slower reps, which we call tempo training. This has 4 phases. The first one is an eccentric phase, which is where you lower the load down. An isometric phase, which is an active pause at the bottom. Concentric is where you lift the weight back up. And isometric is an active pause at the top. So as a coach, I might write on a squat, 3-2-X2. This would mean 3 seconds to squat down, 2 seconds active hold. X stands for explosive, so stand up as quickly as possible. And finally, 2-second pause at the top to reset, brace, and get ready for the next rep. Our goal is to get stronger, but we also want to have some capacity for life. So long walks, going to play golf, etc. So if we do really, really heavy single reps, we won't have any work capacity. And if we do sets of 20, it won't allow us to use enough meaningful load to create the stress to get stronger. So usually, unless you're training for a really specific athletic goal, I would say use sets of 5. It's kind of like a sweet spot in between strength and capacity. We want to also make sure that we are getting stronger as time moves forwards, so we have to increase the load or the stress each time to make sure that we have a dose response. So I might say to a client 1 week, they're going to perform 3 to 5 sets of 5 reps at 3-2-X2 on a squat with 2 to 3 minutes rest in between. They're going to do that at 95 pounds. Next week, they'll do everything the same, but the load will increase by 5 pounds. Now, you may be able to increase the load by 25 pounds. But as a coach, I'm always going to try and hold that back because your ligaments and tendons do not adapt as quickly as your muscles do. They're always lagging behind. So if we push the load too quickly, it may result in an injury to a tendon by just progressing too fast. At some point, this method, which is called linear progression, will stop working because all the novice gains will have run out and you've picked all the low-hanging fruit from the tree. And that's when, if you look at episode 594, we talk about greater complexity of movement and changes to program design beginning to be circled in. So is that it, Kevin? I just hit the gym and do 5 sets of 5 squats at 3-2-X2 and leave? Well, no. It's also important for us to identify weaknesses because we want to become better movers and be more well-rounded. Some of us might have weak ankles or even flat arches on our feet, which could cause the knees to collapse on the squat. Some of us might have a knee collapse caused by having weak glutes. We might see hips lifting too early out the bottom of the squat because of weak hip extension and trying to use the quads more. And these are all things that we want to be able to identify and address. But accessory work is a topic for another episode. So make sure to tune in next week when I'll cover how to self-assess your squat pattern with common errors and talk about some fixes that you may want to try. Until then, Squattobots, roll out. That's me just showing my age with a Transformers joke. Anyway, Get Fit Guy is a quick and dirty tips podcast. Thanks to the team at Quick and Dirty Tips, Adam Cecil, Morgan Christensen, Holly Hutchings, and Davina Tomlin. And our intern is Cameron Lacey. I'm your host, Kevin Dunn. If you have a question for me, leave me a voicemail at 510-353-3104 or send me an email at getfitguy@quickanddirtytips.com. For more information about the show, visit quickanddirtytips.com or check out the show notes in your podcast app.